And then October 7th happened, and I was like, okay, so isn't this what we've been waiting for? Isn't this what everyone's been building their careers and platforms for a moment exactly like this, where we can come out and represent? Because I don't want to hear about representation ever again if you don't represent when the time comes.
Welcome back to The Tea with me, Myriam François. Today, we're joined by one of the sharpest, funniest, and most fearless voices in comedy right now, stand-up comedian Aamer Rahman. Aamer first exploded onto the scene as one half of the trailblazing comedy duo Fear of a Brown Planet. Couching viral attention in 2013 with a quip on reverse racism, he's since built a career blending satire with social commentary, using laughter to interrogate power, prejudice, and politics. Today, we're stepping into the world of comedy in dystopian times, where censorship tightens, politics fractures, and free speech is now contested. From Jimmy Kimmel's suspension over a Charlie Kirk and Donald Trump gag to the explosion of conservative comedy podcasters like Joe Rogan and Theo Von, how does political comedy fight back in a time where nearly 8 in 10 Americans say speech is being overly restricted? We'll ask how comedy intersects with activism, from Gen Z online organizing to international solidarity. And we'll confront the politics of representation and rising Islamophobia. Aamer, thank you for being here.
Hi, Myriam. How are you?
Hi,
Good to be
Aamer.
here.
I saw some of your recent material that was looking, or revisiting, I should say, Bin Laden through the eyes of Gen Z.
Did you see how quickly Gen Z got radicalized? Week 1, it was like white kids sharing TikToks of Frantz Fanon. Week 2, they're like, actually, armed insurgency against occupation is totally legal. Week 3, you guys, I just discovered someone called Osama bin Laden. And what he says about American foreign policy, facts.
And I was watching it and asking myself, could you have done that material 10 years ago, 15 years ago?
Bin Laden stuff?
Yeah.
I was doing Bin Laden material 15 years ago.
Were you saying Bin Laden may have, like, Gen Zs were like pointing out that maybe Bin Laden had a point, that, you know, his writings were maybe quite we're both from an era where, you know, Bin Laden was basically Satan incarnated, right? And if you said anything in any way that sort of maybe suggested he may have understood anything, you know, you risked Guantanamo. So I think we just didn't. But you're saying you felt you could have made these jokes back then?
Well, no, I thought you were just referring to Bin Laden.
Oh, no.
But specifically what you're saying in terms of the ideology and being able to even suggest that, hey, there's something that needs to be understood about why certain things happen historically. Even now, look at the way I'm just like kind of just not saying exactly.
Right.
But yeah, you know, time has allowed that to happen. You're talking to a generation who didn't experience it in any way. It's just like a distant historical fact to them.
Yes.
Even young Muslims.
Yeah, but some of them didn't even live through 9/11, right?
That's what I mean. So you know, it's just a thing. And so now, I do make jokes about it that I wouldn't have 10 years ago.
So what do you think is the main generational difference that you observe in Gen Z in that regard, particularly when it comes to those types of conversations?
I think the main thing is they just didn't live through the immediate backlash, the first years of the war on terror, which is not to say that it's over. It's not to say that it's gone in any way. If anything, it's just kind of more normalized. It's baked into our existence now, which is why political activism looks completely different nowadays. You know, any kind of direct action or militancy is been completely shut down. It was always under attack, but of course accelerated after 9/11. I think this generation has been raised, like all of them, to be content creators in a way that we weren't. And I think the tone of things like TikTok and Instagram is irreverent and is silly. And it lends itself to really not taking things seriously, especially, like I said, if you didn't live through it. You know, like 9/11 is not this big scary thing. It's just something that, you know, your older brother talks about every now and then. It doesn't carry the weight that it did for us because, you know, no one knew what Muslim was the day before, and then, no one would ever stop talking about us the day after.
I was looking through some of your content and I saw that you described your comedy as quote unquote not for white people. And you've recently said that your long form bits work because you trust your audience, that they're basically already on side. So you don't really need to win them over. But we obviously live in a time of deep polarization. A recent US Pew poll showed that 80% of US adults say that Republican and Democratic voters not only disagree on policies, but even on facts, which is crazy. In the UK, 84% of adults say the country feels divided. I don't think we even needed the stats to know that. Given that reality, do you feel any sort of responsibility to talk over the divide?
No.
No.
No. I mean, I just don't think my style of comedy is designed to make white people feel better or less scared.
But what about to educate and inform?
I just say that, like, I don't have the skills. Like, that's not what comes to me when I write comedy. And I don't know that comedy can do that.
Educate and inform?
Yeah. Well, you got me. I think it can educate and inform if people are already on side. I think comedy is much better at normalizing things than not.
Yeah.
So for me, it's about normalizing opposition to the status quo. It's okay not to agree. It's okay to be outside. It's okay to, be different. Converting people is completely different. So yeah, people ask a lot of the time, like reverse racism. It's great that something's out there to explain it to people. And I say, I don't think a lot of people who used to be racist watch that and go, oh man, I was wrong. I didn't get it, but this guy explained it to me.
Okay, we're going to do an actual poll on this. If you're in the comments, we need to hear from you.
None of your viewers.
Listen, we may have some ex-reformed racists.
But you know what I mean? It's.
I hear it. I suppose I tend to take the view that, particularly among the white majority, there's a group that are just swimming in the sea of racism, right? As opposed to kind of actively trying to drink the racism Kool-Aid. Just it is the normative status of the world we live in,
just
and suddenly you come across
it.
you're just bathing in it, and then you come across an Aamer Rahman clip, and you're like, oh, I never thought about things like that. That kind of makes sense to me. Who knows? We'll find out. We'll let you know what the polls say.
I can tell you from my own polls in my own YouTube comments.
Yes,
I've never seen it.
Really?
Right? So it's either like, shut the F up.
Okay.
Or it's like, yes, this is what I think. This is what I've been trying to say. This is how I feel about this. But also, my style is a little bit combative. Like it's not necessarily, I'm not the person for the job, Myriam.
You're not the cuddly type.
I'm the bridge burner, not the bridge builder.
Understood. I mean, look, comedy sometimes can work through the shock factor too. How do you deal with what many today regard as a time of heightened censorship? Do you feel censorship pressure? Do you feel like you have to self-censor?
Who's being censored, right? Who's complaining about censorship? As a Muslim, we're always censoring ourselves. Like we've waited until 2025 for me to make the 9/11 jokes I wanted to make 20 years ago. Do you know what I mean? So we've always been self-policing and self-censoring. The movement that you see in comedy, or that you have in the last 10, 15 years, has been, oh, you can't say anything, and basically like, I can't use racial slurs on stage, and I can't make fun of disabled people, and I can't make jokes about rape, and all these like really superficial, shitty, annoying things that are like meaningless. It's not an understanding of, how power works or how people are actually, stopped from expressing themselves politically. So, I really think a lot of the stuff about censorship now, yeah, it exists, but the people making the most noise about it are not actually subject to it.
What do you think they're actually complaining about if it isn't actually about
what they're
censorship?
complaining about, and I'll say specifically in comedy, is the fact that people can push back, right? People were not able to push back 10, 15 years ago in the same way because social media, just didn't exist. Comedians want to get on stage or online and say whatever they want, and they want everyone to love them. Right? That's really what it is. Like it's really, it doesn't sound that complicated, but it is an ego thing. So they want to say whatever they want, and then when some people get to tweet back at them saying you're a hack or you're racist or whatever, then the sky's falling down and it's it's censorship. Oh, I can't, I can't be on TV or on Netflix because I use this language. Well, you never could. And, if you're such a free speech warrior, why are you complaining that you can't get on like network television or like, be on a corporate TV show? So I think it's really, really hypocritical. And if you just kind of strip the layers away a little bit, you just see like very fragile artists who can't take criticism. I mean, I said what I wanted to say, and I got completely locked out of the industry. I mean, that's what happened.
So you did get censored.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, well, it's always been happening.
Yeah.
You can't be like brown and Muslim and political in Australia.
What about
and
Jimmy
have-
Kimmel?
Of the ban.
Yes.
Well,
the
not even the ban, the
temporary-
temporary suspension.
The temporary suspension that after that Charlie Kirk gag.
And, all the same, free speech warriors were finally like, well, I don't think this is right. Okay, but like Muhammad Khalil got disappeared and people are getting snatched off the streets for writing, op-eds about Palestine. Again, if it just doesn't impact their world, it doesn't matter to them. So, all of it really revolves around this, this clout chasing mentality in entertainment, where people just want sort of universal adoration, and if they don't get it, then they have a tantrum.
You have had jokes removed from the internet, haven't you? Like actively.
I did, but I got it back on.
The Israeli hummus one.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
tell us about that story.
It's a silly joke. It was like, does Israeli hummus have a right to exist? And it's a joke about one versus two state solution, and like
And Iggy Azalea was in there somewhere.
There's always going to be an Iggy
There's
Azalea
always an Iggy
reference.
Azalea reference.
If we're
yeah.
talking about appropriation of any kind, there's going to be
Iggy Azalea's in there somewhere.
Yeah, so it's basically about Israeli hummus is not real, and maybe by extension, a nation that got made up is also not real. And it got taken down from TikTok, but I actually got it back pretty easily. So it wasn't that bad. I didn't lose like the channel or anything. I mean, I quit comedy almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I only came back after October 7th. And I really was like, the material that I put up, I kind of was ready to get banned and lose my channels or whatever. And it didn't happen. And actually the worst pushback that I got was not from Zionists, but was from American liberals because of the jokes that I made about the Democrats. Like vicious backlash online.
So do you think most people are just self-censoring then? Because if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that actually you came back to comedy after a long time. You're thinking like, oh, sorry, I'll just put out my most radical stuff, and if it gets banned, it gets banned. It doesn't get banned. I mean, is that a sign that actually maybe we're all playing it a little safer than we could?
I think I'm lucky. I think I could get banned easily if, I'm going to say it and then it's going to happen. And we're like, if someone tried hard enough and reported my channels enough, and then someone's actually going to do it. Because I've seen people get banned for less, and it's that kind of, it's that completely unpredictable way of, seeing people, lose their content and lose their, access to their social media that kind of scares people. So, yeah, I think that's the difficult part. There's no way to really know what the rules are. I mean, I know people who really haven't said much, but I've just been completely shadow banned. And alhamdulillah, it hasn't happened to me yet, I think. And then once it happens, there's no way to get it back, And I know people who've tried all kinds of ways, and they just, like, it's just permanent.
So it's one of the scary parts of the panopticon that we exist in, where the rules are very nebulous. We're not sure who's making them or how decisions are being made, or even really how to appeal them. I mean, appealing on TikTok and Instagram is very opaque.
I think it doesn't go anywhere. Like, the only time I've ever seen it work is when someone knows someone inside who can manually do something. Because I think all that stuff is just automated, like...
Yeah, but isn't that even scarier then?
Yeah. I think you have no way of fixing it.
But so as someone who's in a profession that relies on your ability to express ideas freely, I mean, are you concerned about the direction of travel when it comes to freedom of expression? Do you think that the right is just shouting about it for nothing? Or is this one of those points where actually, there is an overlap between concerns? And I say this because there was a video I was watching one time on Instagram of this guy whose house was being raided at 2:00 in the morning over a tweet. And I'm watching this video infuriated, thinking he's tweeted something about Palestine, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I can't believe the police are doing this over a tweet. And then I I found out that he was saying bad things about Muslims, and then I had a different reaction.
You're like, hey, well,
Oh well. But then I had to question myself and then think to myself, well, hold on. If I believe in this rule for myself, don't I also believe in it for, people whose views I don't agree with?
yeah.
It was a challenging moment. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I'm a total hypocrite. Like, I don't believe in jail, but then I see some people go and I'm like, hey, sucks to be you.
Yeah.
Again, it's the way it's applied, right? Like, sure, they have the power to do all these things, but who is it really affecting? I mean, sorry, the far right has like exploded, right? Without, social media and how lax they've been has allowed the far right to expand into a massive international phenomenon in a way that it just wouldn't have been able to before. I just don't think they're being punished or shut down the way specifically you would say like pro-Palestinian views. But like we know it's being targeted. We know like they're announcing it. Like they're trying to buy the platforms to stop it from happening. So sure, in general, like macro level, am I opposed to censorship? Sure, but it's just not happening to everyone the same way.
And of course, yeah, it's worth pointing out that Elon Musk owns X, and there was a recent report looking at far right content on there, and I think it was something like 70% of the content on there, according to a Sky News report, turned out to be far right content, literally like pumping it out in a completely disproportionate way.
Well, if the owner of the platform is pumping it out, what's going to happen? If the owner of the platform is promising you, this is the place to hang out. If you think like this, it's part of the business model.
Yeah. Are you still on X?
I am.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because my X feed is just, I try never to watch it first thing in the morning or last thing in the evening, because if that's the world, I can't live in it.
Yeah, and sometimes I don't realize I'm on the For You versus following. So I'm just like in this rage cycle of who are these people? Why is this being fed to me?
Why is this being fed to me? Yeah, absolutely. Do you see a lot of reform stuff on there?
Oh, yeah, well, I mean, Elon Musk said it. He said he's going to use the algorithm to give you equally the stuff that you like and the stuff that you hate, because both of those things will generate like the highest engagement. So it's they're pretty open about it.
Let me ask you about the role of the comedian in this time, because we've seen comedians actually, comedians/podcasters take on quite a significant role in our political sphere. We've seen, obviously, the platforms, these podcast platforms, being used by politicians as part of their campaign trails, and whether it's Joe Rogan or Theon Von, some of the biggest comedy podcasters have been instrumental, arguably, in Trump's election. What do you think it is about comedians at this time that makes them such astute political commentators?
I think comedians have made themselves useful idiots for the right. A lot of these guys, if you have them one-on-one in a room, they're not far right. But they subscribe to this idea that they're comedians, they live somehow magically above the rest of us, they're not on the political compass anywhere, they can talk to anyone. What that means is they're very malleable, right? And the only thing they're really loyal to, again, is, like I said, this kind of clout engagement culture. And so if you flatter them enough, and you're the president or you're, a politician, and you agree to go on their show, they'll give you a softball interview. And what have they done? Like, it allows politicians and other figures to use them as tools, but as free publicity tools. And it's only when, and then when the backlash comes, like happened to, Flagrant podcast, Theo Vaughn, people like this, that, why did you have Trump on? Oh, well, we're just a fun podcast. You can't blame us. We wanted to have Kamala Harris on. She didn't come. It's like, guys, are you stupid or are you acting stupid? Like, if you platform a political figure and you don't have the basic brains to question them or push back, I mean, you're doing like a free advertisement for Trump or whoever you have on. But again, like when people don't have just a basic analysis of power, this is what's going to happen to you. You're going to chase engagement. You're going to chase, the algorithm to get your clips and your clicks or whatever. And then, people will use you.
And when you say a basic understanding of power, what is it that you're alluding to that people should be aware of?
Well, that if you have a powerful person on your platform, that you're responsible for how you respond to what they say. If you just sit there and let them say whatever they want, and they'll say, "Oh, we're not journalists," well, then don't do it. And a lot of people are now saying, "Well, comedians should never have a politician." No, have them on if you're just going to have like the basic sense of an adult to say, these people shouldn't just be able to spout whatever they want while they're sitting next to me.
So if I'm hearing you right, I mean, there's a whole bunch of comedians/podcasters who are essentially being used to avoid having to speak to journalists who might want to ask maybe
Absolutely.
more serious questions.
Why would a politician go on a serious news program that's going to ask them about policy and, trip them up with, things that they've done in the past? If you can just sit there and no one's going to ask you about Jeffrey Epstein, you can literally joke about lying and the podcast host is going to laugh along with you. Like, well, why would you? It's exactly as you said. It's a way of short-circuiting or bypassing, traditional media.
Yeah. Although I would say that I feel like legacy media's role as a watchdog has also massively deteriorated.
Absolutely.
And that it's shocking to me the extent to which a lot of what I would have hoped that our colleagues would be doing to hold powerful people to account, particularly over the llast 2 years, has been shockingly poor, and those who have tried have often disappeared from our screens.
I mean, which is why I say, like, people are saying comedians shouldn't have anyone. No, have them on. Because again, I also don't trust legacy media to do the job either. In many ways, like the sort of collapse or the shrinking of legacy media is what's allowed these podcasts to expand, right? Because they're kind of filling this space that's kind of between radio and TV. 4 or 5 guys hanging around, just talking shit for 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
It's content that just no one else is producing. You're a young man, you're not watching TV, you're not listening to the radio, you want to have something on in the background. A lot of these podcasts, and I try to explain to people because they see a comedian, they send me people send me comedy clips all the time. Hey, this is hilarious. Okay, but they don't know that like they sent me a clip of someone that I hate because I've been hate watching their content for 10 years. You see a comedian's clip of their stand-up, and it's fine. The persona that they have on their podcast, which only their, Patreon subscribers or people who are really loyal to them listen to, is completely different. And for a lot of these, you'll see these guys sitting around for 3 hours, and there's just like a persistent, casual racism that just pervades the entire thing. Now, can you cut any of those specific things up and put it online and it'll be viral? No, it's not that bad. But if it's 3 hours of that and you're listening to that every single week, then that is influencing the way people behave. That is influencing culture in a way that, what are you going to do? It's completely independent. It completely bypasses, like a lot of content online. And not that I'm saying, it needs to be regulated and it needs to be stopped. I just understand that it's out there and it's invisible to you. If you're not into it, it's invisible to you. So when someone sends me a clip of Andrew Schultz and it's something stupid, it's either a 10-minute voice note from me going, do you know what this person has done to info, blah, blah, or it's me just being like, oh, funny. Like, to explain to people what's actually happening in a corner of the internet that they're completely unfamiliar with.
So it's interesting because I have observed this when it comes to a misogyny, where the casual misogyny of the locker room is now exposed if you actually listen to a lot of these bros podcasts, right? There's like
we're talking about exactly the same podcast.
Hardcore.
It's racist, sexist,
yeah.
everything.
And then what I observe is when those same people sometimes come and comment on our videos, I observe the type of commentary, which I refer to as basic bitch commentary, which is things to do with the looks of either guests or myself, or to do with anything that is nothing related to the content itself.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we are back in, I don't know, whatever the era was where women shouldn't talk and should just be, and they grade us. They still grade us, Aamer. They still give us numbers. And I'm
You get a
just,
scorecard.
oh, yeah, how cute. Speaking of Andrew Schultz, he was making a gag recently. You may have heard about this. And you responded to it, in fact.
Did I?
Yes, apparently you
Right.
did.
I remember the things that I do.
By saying, funny how these comedy geniuses have nothing to say about fascism or genocide, but sitting around laughing at dead Palestinian kids is hilarious, edgy content. Comedy is full of cynical, clout-chasing bootlickers like this. So what I wanted to ask you about this Andrew Schultz gag, and to be honest, it's not the first, unfortunately, comedian to make a gag about dead children or dead Palestinians. You know the kind of inner workings of how comedy operates. What does what a society finds funny tell us about that society?
It's a similar mindset, when it comes to this. And frankly, this is mainstream comedy. These are the biggest names in comedy now. This is not like some fringe thing. And somewhere along the line, there was just this rule invented that, comedians can joke about anything and, they're the last line of defense against free speech. There's all nonsense that comedians made up about themselves, right? Comedians will sit there on a podcast and be like, yeah, no, comedians have special brains and like, we only see the world in a certain way. Like, well, you've never seen a funny movie or like heard a funny lyric in a song. Like comedians don't have a monopoly over this like magic power. But, there's like a deep intention behind the comedy, which is a cynicism about we're not attached to anything. We don't care about anything. Everything is fair game. And that's just like, to me, that's just like intentional ignorance about how the world works, right? I don't want to engage with how, people fit differently in society. I don't want to engage with power. I don't want to engage with, people who have less. So everything's fair game to me. And it's just lazy. It just means that you don't have to think. And it means you just, produce hacky stuff about stereotypes and I can make fun of how women look. And so what if there's a racial slur? It's your fault. You're the one getting upset about it. So the main thing that these, in addition to the racism and sexism, the other thing that these podcasts or that culture breeds is just a deep cynicism and apathy. That there's really nothing wrong with the world. Everything's funny. There's just no, as artists, there's no compassion in terms of where the art is coming from. And I know that sounds extremely corny to say and to break down comedy and how art should be, made out of love or whatever. But that's really it. When I say my comedy is not for white people, I mean, the flip side of that is my comedy is for people like me. It's for Muslims. It's for brown people. It's people who have faced these kind of things. Who's their comedy for? Oh, my comedy is for people who like to laugh at anything. Oh, congratulations. Like that's not edgy or dangerous. Like you're just absolving yourself of any responsibility for what comes out of your mouth. That's not smart.
I guess it's the commercialization aspect that I find difficult to understand when those gags are about things like, I mean, you mentioned Jimmy Carr there. I remember, he makes pedophile jokes. And for me, I get the logic that, comedians should be able to make jokes about anything. And that actually that's why we herald them as these sort of, free speech warriors, because they'll tread where many of us wouldn't dare to tread. But then I'm also like, why is that where you wanted to tread?
Because they don't have anything to say. This is what I said
in the
tweet that I don't remember.
Why do these people who have nothing to say get airtime?
Because people don't want to think about the things that we want to talk about.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's I call it McDonald's comedy. Like it's high volume, low nutrition, mindless fun. It's it's easy to pump out. It's people like to consume it. It doesn't make people uncomfortable the way we think it should make people uncomfortable. And so it's easy to put out.
And what about the moral responsibility that, perhaps you and I agree comedians have vis-a-vis the juncture at which we find ourselves in? To me, at least, it feels way too urgent right now to be discussing anything if you have a public platform without really thinking carefully about what you're communicating. What do you make about the choices that people are having to make to continue to make comedy in an environment that is hostile to certain ideas and points of view? And so I asked that in the context, of course, of the controversy that happened over the Riyadh Comedy Festival. You probably saw that the comedian Mark Maron went viral for basically calling out a load of people who'd attended. He said the same guy that's going to pay them is the same guy that paid that guy to bonesaw Jamal Khashoggi and put him in an effing suitcase. But don't let that stop the yucks. It's going to be a good time.
Don't let this interview stop my Hajj, Myriam.
I know. I think about mine all the time. Is it any more problematic for a comedian to perform in Riyadh than it is in Washington?
No. it's not problematic to perform in any place. But who's paying you? It's very simple, and a lot of these guys are just doing like rhetorical donuts trying to avoid it. Oh, a lot of these guys, the people wanted it, as if Saudis are like backwards people who've never had any access to Western culture. Like, come on, guys. Like, this wasn't a charity mission. You can perform in Washington. Are you going to perform at the Donald Trump, comedy extravaganza? No. It's not even about like specifically Saudi. Like, being paid, especially if you're in a genre of entertainment that prides itself on being independent and, not taking orders from anyone, it matters where the check comes from.
So I'll push back and say, would it be all right to take the check if you made the joke about the people who killed Jamal Khashoggi while you were there?
No one is going to do that. And they all signed contracts. We've seen the contract.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. Someone leaked it. Someone who refused to go.
Anything you want to spill
leaked.
about that? What were the terms?
Well, you cannot make fun of the royal family or the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I mean, it wasn't long.
Okay.
It was like that's
your red line.
And then, a lot of the comedians were like, well, there was only a couple of things. Okay, buddy.
Yeah.
I mean, they're pretty big things.
Was the big one.
Yeah.
Well, during his set in Riyadh, Dave Chappelle turned around and flipped this and said, right now in America, they say that if you talk about Charlie Kirk, you'll get cancelled. I don't know if that's true, but I'm going to find out. He followed that with, it's easier to talk here in Saudi Arabia than it is in America. Is that true?
No, it's not true. I mean, it depends on what you're saying.
So criticizing the governments of individual countries, do you think that you can compare criticizing the US government in America to criticizing the Saudi government in Saudi?
Impossible. Like it's actually such an absurd comparison.
So I'm only asking it because I'm guessing that you, like I, have long been Dave Chappelle fans.
I wouldn't be doing comedy unless it was for Dave Chappelle.
There we go. So I think a lot of us look at Dave Chappelle and the poor guy carries all of our hopes and dreams. So I realize it's a lot to put on one man, but certainly a truth teller, right? The guy who would go and say the thing that no one else wanted to be said. So I was just curious about this, am I missing something? Maybe the check.
Some things that I see that are just baffling to me.
Yeah.
Because there's people who I don't think need the money. And there's things that, like I said, like some of the justifications were, like people just said, hey, like, I want to go. I want to perform. I don't really have any jokes about this anyway. Like that would make more sense to me than talking about how, it's good to help, Saudi Arabia kind of modernize if I go and perform comedy. Come on, buddy. Like,
well, the worst part is that Human Rights Watch actually pointed out that the comedy festival was being used to deflect tensions about political opposition in the country.
Aziz Ansari offered to donate money to Human Rights Watch and they said they couldn't take it.
Wow.
A bunch of them went, and then there were interviews afterwards. And then, as part of his kind of justification, he was like, "Well, I think it's really important, and I'm going to give back." And he kind of announced on television that he was going to donate to Human Rights Watch. And I think they immediately had to say, "Sorry, we can't accept money that's clearly come from the people that we are criticizing."
I think these are all the complexities that we increasingly find ourselves in because partly of the censorship that we're talking about, right? If you want to say things that are critical of the US government, as a comedian today, are you going to have a career in America? Probably not. Do you then take checks from other countries that also have their own problems?
If you had a career in America, you wouldn't be getting paid by the government. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't believe in like we're disqualifying places because of who the government is.
Okay.
It's about who is paying you and who is deciding what you get to say. Even if I go to the US and I perform, and definitely I don't say certain things because I'm scared of what the government's going to do to me. I mean, that's different to them being my employer and saying, in exchange for this check, you're going to shut up.
Right. I'm just, aware that there's less and less space in many of the countries that we think of as being places we could express political critique. And, we're speaking here in London today where, there are things you actually literally can't say. Palestine Action is a direct group here in the UK. You cannot express support for that group without risking terrorism charges. I'm aware that you're a comedian that likes to push boundaries in these things. Do you think it's important to push back against these red lines that, governments put down in terms of what can and can't be said through your comedy?
Yeah, definitely. As much as I can. That's why I came back to comedy after October 7th, because I was waiting. I was just like, okay, this seems pretty clear cut to me, what's going on. And it's 2023. We have people who are famous and we have people who have platforms and they're Arab or they're Muslim. Like, they don't need to be educated about what's happening. We've been raised understanding this conflict. We know exactly what the dynamic is here. So surely this is what we've been working towards, right? Because we've all been talking about how we're representing our communities and we're giving everyone a voice and, we're saying the things that, normally aren't heard anywhere. And then October 7th happened and I was like, okay, so isn't this what we've been waiting for? Isn't this what everyone's been building their careers and platforms for a moment exactly like this where we can come out and represent? Because I don't want to hear about representation ever again if you don't represent when the time comes. And that happened. It just happened with a lot of people. And that's why I decided, like, well, maybe it'll be useful, maybe it won't, whatever. I would like to at least have said that when this window opened, this very unique moment in time opened, where people were receptive to criticism of Zionism, that I did something. I mean, I'm not saying that it was useful or whatever, but just for myself, I said something or I contributed to it a little bit.
Speaking about kind of, I guess, activism and responding to this dystopian period in which we find ourselves where, please tell me how you're feeling about it. To me, it feels like so much of the world as we knew it is disintegrating. So much of what we took for granted, that we lived in democracies, that yes, free speech was faulted, but it was still there and most people believed in it. That the right to protest, okay, there were attempts to infringe on it, but it was core to who we were. The UN, central to international peace and security, human rights. Okay, we knew about Guantanamo, but we also believe that most people, it's all like
fracturing completely,
in front of our eyes. And I find it, it's very destabilizing, to put it mildly, to watch this disintegration without clarity on where to from here.
Yeah. After October 7, the masks have come off and they've come off everywhere. And even us who are, living in maybe like an uncomfortable bubble, now, again, like whatever facade we had put on it to, be able to go day to day has been ripped off.
Absolutely.
And like, we'll just have to deal with it.
Yeah.
It's like when once you get pulled out of the matrix, you can't just go back inside. And I think for a lot of us, we already thought we were out of the matrix.
Yeah.
Right? We already thought, I can see through these things and this is all fake and whatever, whatever. But like, we didn't realize, like you said, especially, in the global north, like we still had this layer of padding around us.
We were, most of us, I'll speak for myself at least, pandering to it because we wanted to stay alive, like make a living, be able to, pay rent. I think the big shift is one that personally feels much more satisfying. I feel like I feel much more coherent in myself. But I think that the challenges that we face in this new juncture are quite severe. And part of that is in terms of how we respond as a counterculture, as a counter movement to the disintegration of all these institutions. And, my big question is, are we salvaging? Are we trying to fix and put the pieces back together? Are we saying, well, actually, that kind of never really worked that well, so we need new things? And if we're looking at new things, what are our reference points? I find so many things challenging about this conversation, even down to what are our common values? Think about America as an example, right? But we could take Britain. We're just like a poor copy at the moment. You're talking about a nation where a significant number of people believe that their religious texts, this is what's always landed at us, which is why I think it's hilarious. They believe their religious texts should define law, right?
For everyone.
For everyone.
Not just for themselves.
And I struggle with the idea of how do we build common futures together when I say, okay, I think women should be able to make choices about their bodily autonomy. And you say, no, my religious text says this, and
it applies to you.
And it applies to you. How do we build a common future together? I just don't even know where to start.
Back to the disintegration. I think it was going to happen anyway, right? Like it's not an anomaly that suddenly everything's collapsing. It's just, again, because of October 7th, and other things, it's accelerated.
For sure.
You know, like none of these things were going to stay this way. They were already designed to like corrode over time. But, you know, a moment has been created where all of the systems are under a different kind of stress. And so they're reacting much faster in a way that they eventually would have, maybe 10, 15 years down the line. And so basically it's forcing us to make these decisions and kind of come to these understandings a lot quicker. That this thing that we felt comfortable in is actually it's quicksand, basically.
And in terms of how we build out from this moment, I've been watching an incredible documentary called Dear Mama, which I highly recommend, which is about Tupac's identity as a Black Panther. It's his story told through like the Black Panther perspective, and primarily through his mother, Afeni. And one of the things that struck me about the documentary was that the Black Panthers are, first of all, obviously operating on the ground first and foremost, right? This is pre-digital media. Obviously, they're operating on the ground and they're creating concrete material solutions to concrete material problems, you know, breakfast clubs, things that people need, food, you know, childcare, cleaning up neighborhoods from drugs, etc. The response to them doing that in that era was essentially murdering everyone and putting everyone else in prison. This is pre us all basically carrying a tracker on us 24/7. It's pre-digital facial recognition. It's pre-forms of surveillance of all of our communications. You know, they actually had to like infiltrate with a human,
With a real person.
with a real person.
With the disguise.
I watched it with a mixture of immense admiration for what was being done and profound concern for if that was the government's response to that form of political organization then, how can we expect to resist in this time?
You know, you read about what the Panthers did, which was at times willing to go to war with the police because they were murdering them. And not just the Panthers, Black Liberation Army, like, you know, the Black Power movement in general. It's like reading mythology because, you know, forget post 9/11. I mean, the intentional dismantling and total destruction of the Black radical tradition and any kind of militancy since in all Western countries, you know, the dismantling of unions, dismantling of the student movement, you know, has led to basically, you know, those things being just relics of the past. Like that kind of resistance doesn't exist, and not by accident, not because the world got better, but because they erased it.
We're talking about resistance, and for me, a lot of resistance was learning about, for example, the struggles of other peoples through music. And in particular, you know, hip hop was an entry point for learning about stories of the African American experience from themselves. You know, I wasn't having it filtered through Fox News and CNN. I was hearing, you know, Black Power through my headphones. I still consider Dead Prez to be one of the most important musical contributions of all
Absolutely.
time.
Even if it's only one song you get to pick, they were incredible. And you know, that kind of music is not popular or mainstream anymore. I wouldn't say Dead Prez was mainstream, but I mean,
No.
even the level of attention that they had as a independent group, I think that and a political independent group doesn't exist anymore.
But this is connected to what we're discussing, right? Because
Yes.
all of these are spaces of community resistance, right? Where in a way we were able to talk to one another in a direct way. And we're convinced today that we can do that. I'll jump on Instagram after this interview and I'll be convinced I'm talking directly to all of these people. But I'm not, because I'm filtering what I'm saying through the concerns of, you know, Meta shadow banning me, which they already do, probably people watching it to be able to find something against me, et cetera, et cetera. Same with the communal spaces. We don't meet in communal spaces. We do a lot online. Where are we constituting even the ideological basis for a fight back? You know, music being one of them, but we could think of others. People don't read. You know, I don't want to demean, like, I'm a geek. Like, I actually have always liked reading, but I understand a lot of people don't. I'm not looking down on that. I'm just observing that that's a
Culturally, yeah.
reality. And my concern is what I learned in books is invaluable to me. So where are you getting yours? Is TikTok going to be enough?
That's what we've got. I totally get what you're saying. To go back to the music aspect, because I think something that pops up often now is people are saying, "Where's hip hop?"
Yeah.
In this moment, right? Because people have a lot of people were politicized and radicalized.
I mean,
by
if
listening to
Kendrick
hip-hop.
and Drake is the best we've got, like Kendrick versus Drake, ooh, Gaza's
What?
going on, ooh, Drake's a Charlie.
I mean, the Super Bowl, right? Kendrick's performance at the Super Bowl,
Okay.
right, was, a lot of people said it was political.
So
right?
was
It was
Beyonce's.
political, but it was confined to, I would say, a domestic critique. The only mention of Gaza came when
The guy came
our
out.
brother invaded the field with his
God
flags,
bless
right?
his soul.
That was it. But the hip hop that we grew up on, Tupac, Public Enemy, anyone from the 80s and 90s,
Yeah.
were literally the children of the civil rights and Black Power movement, whether their parents were directly involved or not. I mean, they grew up in that culture. It's no coincidence that the lengths that the government went to sever that link, to put like a major stop to the Black radical tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that basically cuts off the history that can then inform another generation. So I know people always say, hip hop's corporatized and it's subjected to all of it, which is true. Absolutely, it's true. Just like all entertainment and all culture, it is corporatized, and of course, like it's depoliticized and it has any radical element sucked out of it. But I think people forget the time and the resources and the violence that were put in to killing, like literally killing the movement that informed those early generations of hip hop.
But that's why we are technically very tame today.
We are? Yeah, we are, absolutely.
No,
Yeah.
because I think there's a lot of people who are thinking, oh, like, this new generation, they're becoming really radical. And I'm like, do you guys know history? This is not radical. We have not yet reached, in my view, radical levels. When people start organizing in community levels to protect themselves,
Yeah.
maybe we can start talking. But we're not there at all. And I don't actually even know if we'll get there. The other thing about the Black radical tradition that you were talking about that I think I feel personally is a glaring omission from our current conversations is internationalism. So one thing I learned in the documentary was that Tupac was called Tupac because he was named after the last Peruvian indigenous leader, and that Afeni had specifically given him that name so that he understood that African-American struggle was not a singular struggle, that it was connected to other struggles and that other people had fought similar battles before them. And it seems to me now that we've become very segmented in our struggles, very sort of divided into these silos of individual struggles, and we can't encroach on each other's struggles. Is there any way to push back against a system this pervasive, this powerful, whilst we remain segmented according to the most minute aspects of our identity?
One of the many things that made certainly things like the Black Power movement especially threatening to the US government was an international analysis, right? That they connected the struggle of Black people in the US to oppressed people worldwide. I mean, this was central to sort of Black Panther's ideology, to Malcolm X's ideology, to Martin Luther King's ideology near the end of his life when he started speaking out on Vietnam. And so, Sohail Dolasai talks about this in his book, Black Star Crescent Moon, that the negotiation has always been, look, we'll give you concessions at home. You stop talking about what's happening abroad, right? This is the way to contain it, okay? We can negotiate here internally, but just forget about what's happening, what America is doing outside. Because that, of course, then opens up a range of other very dangerous connections that are difficult to police. This is why I think they hate Muslims, because we don't have an allegiance to states. We have an allegiance to a global family, that cannot be policed. So in Gen Z's defense, again, they've grown up completely divorced from any kind of militant or radical tradition. right? They haven't witnessed the kind of resistance we want to see. So they're only able to model what they've seen.
So it's on us.
Yeah, it's a little bit on us, but also what I will say is that they have won on different fronts that we weren't able to. Specifically with reference to Israel, the Israeli propaganda, Gen Z has been able to counteract in ways that we weren't. They've got completely different tools. They've got a total edge, but they've been at the forefront of that. Like the way that they have been able to debunk and fight back against, Zionist nonsense, we couldn't.
Why do you think that is?
Well, we just had to sit there and watch TV, which was just completely controlled. There was no way to push back. Whereas now, these kids are they're born digital natives. They're able to use the technology faster than it can be controlled. It's taken them 2 years to decide to buy TikTok. It's too late, right? Because from day one, these kids are educating each other. So it's not maybe everything we wish it was, but I think there's things that are still quite phenomenal that young people have been able to do, even if it's not what we would like to see, what we would hope in terms of resistance. They're still carrying kind of the bulk of it, right? Whatever we see on the street in terms of protests or campus occupations, it's still kind of on their shoulders. So they're carrying it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And have successfully in some countries, particularly in the global south, succeeded in actually toppling government. So there's no question to me that Gen Z have that radical strand within them. I'm just wondering about the challenges when it comes to countering what feels to me like an increasingly and very rapidly expanding surveillance state that is very punitive in terms of any form of resistance to state power. And I find that is much more pervasive than at any other time in my life.
Yes.
And that worries me, I guess.
It's just going to come to a breaking point. And maybe that's 10 or 15 years. We don't know. Because you're right. I mean, the level of surveillance, the chilling effect of something like, we were talking about how long some of the Palestine Action activists have been in jail. That will have an effect. I think, because the moment has hit us so quickly, we want to push back and fix it just as quickly.
That's not how
it might
works.
not,
So in that sense, you're a supporter, I presume, of the 80s themed yoga class that was held outside the Portland ICE facility recently.
Wow.
I'm guessing the World Naked Bike Ride, also the Anti-Fascist Frog, important forms of cultural resistance to fascism.
Militant displays of heroics. Liberalism just doesn't know what to do with itself, right? The mask that's come off, I think, the most violently has been on liberalism. And it starts with the Democrats, being the architects of the genocide. And then witnessing, American liberals and then also the Labour Party here and the Labour Party in Australia. And they've all been complicit in the genocide. Their voting bases have kind of gone along with it. So, what do these people stand for? When Biden was in power and people used to disrupt whatever, event he was at, it was, 4 more years. It's those same people now sitting at Kamala Harris at her book tour when someone stands up and, trying to clap them out of the building. So it's dead. Liberalism's dead. We're going to get to Zoran Mamdani.
We are about to, you are reading my mind. I was like, so Zoran Mamdani is a win for liberalism or a counterpunch? You tell me.
I don't want to rain on anyone's parade. I know, well, first of all, I mean, Zoran himself, he clearly has an anti-Zionist grassroots organizing background. He didn't just fall out of the sky. And I think this is part of why he was able to build his coalition. I don't think he grew up aspiring to be a politician. He just did serious grassroots work in New York. People know this. He went on a hunger strike with taxi drivers. He worked against home foreclosures. And so I think that's how he built a lot of goodwill within the community, within, the voters that Democrats had abandoned completely. He went to immigrant communities who had turned to Trump out of desperation, just because he's the only person who said he would do anything about their cost of living. And he mobilized them. He said that the Democrats had a policy of only going to what they call AAA voters, their usual, mostly white middle class voters, and just appealing to them again and again. And he kind of broke the mold. People are critical, they're cautious, they should be. But for me, it's just like, well, what are your expectations of electoral politics? What do you expect to be delivered? Do you think electoral politics is going to save us in this moment? It's not. Okay? And if you agree that it's not, then, what are some good things we can get out of it?
If electoral politics aren't going to save us, what is going to save us?
Subscribe to the Patreon to find out, because we don't want to publish it. We are heading for some major system failure. We are. We always were. Like, a capitalist system is just not going to last forever, in some nice, harmonious way. That's the whole point, is you extract until there's nothing left. So there's always an end point. And I just think it's coming sooner than we think.
Let me ask you about some of the Islamophobic responses to Mamdani's election, because those memes were also beautifully derided by our Gen Z brethren. But they also kind of told us a lot, I feel, about where we are at, which is that old type of prejudice that is so normalized among boomers.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole new gen that are just like, I mean, you just look weird.
Yeah.
So let me just show you in a very funny meme how pathetic you look. Do you take hope that that is a sign that the kind of highly pervasive Islamophobia that we're living through right now is on the out?
No, because I think we saw after October 7, it was like someone had just flicked a switch, and it was 2001 again. So, but again, maybe they're not able to organize necessarily radically, in a certain way.
Yeah.
But like you said, there is a way to push back now. There is a way to counter this kind of stuff. With racism, I really...
Mamdanistan? That was a favorite.
Like, they call it the caliphate, right?
Yes.
Racists are calling it the caliphate and Mamdanistan. And we're using the same terms like a celebration because it's funny to us.
I have long said I live in Londonistan.
Londonistan, New Yorkistan. I mean, they've been like that. They didn't just become like that. If you look at any Western country, nothing has been done to curb Islamophobia since 9/11. Like, no measures have been taken. People have traded on it, cashed in on it, weaponized it. The initial sting is gone because Iraq and Afghanistan were 20 years ago. And, the initial clampdown on people was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But the systems are in place. The systems are in place and expanding. Look at Palestine Action. I mean, are you telling me, like, none of the extra terror laws that have been put through in the last 20 years could cover that? No, but, this is the nature of these things, that they will only ever expand. And, in terms of the reactions to Mamdani, I mean, you see it in the legacy papers. It's like 2001 all over again. Now, the reality on the ground is a little bit different because now there's a generation that's grown up, us who had to fight it, and a generation younger than us who is less traumatized because they didn't have to fight it, but also now know how to react to it. But yeah, I would never count out the racism.
We haven't really touched on Gaza in terms of the impact that the last 2 years have had on us as a Muslim community. And I haven't really been able to have this conversation with anyone actually until now. And I wanted to have it with you because I think that you and I share similar reference points in this regard, that, we as Muslims, we believe in an ummah, a wider community of believers that we are connected to. That doesn't mean that we obviously don't care about other people, but that's a sort of allegiance that we have, a proximity that we have. And it's been very challenging to watch our brethren being exterminated in a way where our Muslim majority countries, leaders of Muslim majority countries have failed to, invoke what to us is quite a central tenet of the faith, which is, if one part of the body is, hurting, that the whole body kicks in to save it. How has the last 2 years impacted you specifically as a Muslim?
It's really hard. It's on the one hand, you have, really the example of Palestinians. You see things that, like, we've never seen before. There's a doctor operating in a destroyed hospital, and as the bodies come in, it's her own family, you know? And she says, you know, I'm not defeated. We don't see things like that. Or we can't even imagine like being able to do that ourselves. And then, you know, it's like you said, you know, the Muslim world, you know, like, why can't anyone get to Gaza? Because you can't get through the Muslim countries that would, you know, you'd have to pass through. You can't go through Jordan. You can't go through Egypt. So I think it's created, you know, kind of this dual crisis of faith for a lot of people. You know, on the one hand, we're sort of inspired, obviously, by the resistance and the resilience of Palestinians. And then on the other hand, we're like, why do they have to do this? Why do they have to keep resisting when, you know, every Muslim country is on their doorstep, you know, and could do something about it?
I think for me, the dual challenge has been at once a sort of, as you say, watching Palestinians having to literally embody the ideals of the faith in under the worst human circumstances possible, combined with a sense that if they're upholding their faith in that environment, where the hell are we? Where are we?
Mm.
For me, it's caused also like a crisis in terms of how I view the wider community. It's also implicated, you know, when we look at Sudan, because it's, you know, the Emirates, you know, a Muslim majority nation involved in the extermination of our
Directly involved, yeah.
Sudanese brethren, also Muslims. Like, at a certain point, it's this question of, have we become so colonized as individual Muslims that we're unable to even see the faith beyond kind of parochial daily practices? And what are the risks of that, like, for us as a community of believers? Isn't the strength of these parts of the world, you know, whether it's the Middle East or beyond, like, the strength has always come from our ability to unite through a shared set of values. Is this the ultimate capitulation?
I think the hope that I have is that the Ummah's not capitulating, but the leadership has, you know, and not only has the leadership capitulated, now, you know, they're responsible for the repression of the Ummah. The policing of the Ummah is being done by its own leaders. So it's not a solution, but, you know, I haven't lost hope that the majority of Muslims feel exactly this way.
I also worry about it to the extent of the bigger picture of what we're talking about, which is that we need to organize and resist. And the we here is much bigger than Muslims. It's all of us who care about things like freedom and equality and living in a world where, like, billionaires don't get to, you know, exterminate people en masse for profit. We are increasingly going to be perceived as terrorists. I mean, the Muslims have been for a long time. But I'm just saying, you know, Pal Action is an example of the beginning of what I see as the expansion of that circle of who's deemed terrorist to all those that push up against power. And for us as a community of believers who have responsibilities towards one another, don't we have a right or an obligation to do something about that?
I told you, we're heading for a total system crash. There's no, like, nice way out of this. It's in motion. They're not going to stop. You know, we said this 20 years ago. We said if you start to expand the definition of terrorist, eventually it'll include you.
And now it's including climate activists.
Yeah. What we forgot is it would include us again. That's the second part. And we were like, oh, they're coming for you. They're coming for us always, and then you. It's in the DNA of the system to do this. There's no negotiating with it. There's no, you know, altering its course.
I'll be honest with you. I mean, for me, the only hope I see is, you know, there is a judgment day coming, and some people will have to hear that long list read out to them, and we will observe and watch and be like, yeah, we lived through it, we remember. But in the here and now, I do struggle sometimes to find hope. Where are you sourcing yours?
Sometimes I just think like we don't get to see the happy ending. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and that's kind of what our faith is for, is that, you know, like, we still have a way to live without the promise of, you know, it being fixed. You know, like we still have a way to live and worship and exist, and we have a code that we live by regardless of the circumstances. And I think that's, and what else do we have?
Aamer Rahman, thank you very much for
Thanks
taking
for
the
having
time
me.
to talk to me. If you enjoyed today's episode, hit that subscribe button to support our work, share it with your friends, and let us know what you thought in the comments below. You can also follow our work on Instagram and TikTok. The links are in the bio. And if you haven't yet, join us on Patreon. Patreon members get ad-free episodes, bonus content, and a say in shaping our upcoming stories. Your support helps us stay independent, fearless, and uncensored. Until next time, stay curious, keep questioning, and keep pushing back.